90% of the time, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
It's not.
It gets the people going.
You're now listening to Diag Nonsense.
Look at all this damage!
With Justin Pendergrass and Kurt Honak.
You are a sad, strange little man.
Then we would just be idiots saying nonsense.
So trial by combat.
Dude, okay.
I demand satisfaction.
So let me read this to
and
you.
I'm not talking
because
about
it's too
the
good.
Will Smith incident.
No, we're not going to talk about that because that was already trial by combat, and Will took the cake. All right, so it says a court has rejected a 60-year-old man's attempt at invoking the ancient right of trial by combat rather than pay a $25 fine for a minor motor offense. So this guy, he's like, you know what? Gas prices are way too high. I'm going to fight to the death.
I need that $25.
That $25 goes way too long. That's milk and eggs for a week. And he's saying, like, inflation's up by 7%. So I get it, dude. I'll do trial by combat.
Where's this at?
I don't actually know.
It's gotta be in
it might not
England
even
or
be a
somewhere.
true thing, but I
sounds
think
like
it's
a
hilarious.
European.
Yeah.
people.
Oh, you're right. You know what?
It's in England,
Was
isn't
still valid under the European human rights legislation, so he's pushing for this.
it? Right.
You're going to cut all this out, right?
No, I'm gonna leave it in.
The trial by combat stuff. Dang, our entire transition is ruined because of you.
I think
Yeah.
it's part of a government conspiracy to
It is.
defraud and discredit this podcast.
That's true. You know,
There are CIA operatives among us.
they heard that we were pushing for trial by combat, and they were super mad.
Our
They're
guest
like,
is
we
a
can't
CIA
do that.
operative.
Celebrities will be killed. The Illuminati will get involved. It's not going to work out for us.
Last person the CIA would want working for them.
Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in to Diag Nonsense. I'm your host, Justin Pendergrass. I'm here with my co-host, Kurt Honak. What's up, Kurt?
Hey, man. How's it going?
Good, man. I'm going to throw it over to Isaac for some quick housekeeping, and then we're going to introduce our guest.
Okay, boys, April's coming up. So here at my house, we've got a couple things on the docket. We're not doing a screening in the cafe for any movies this month.
Okay.
But what we are doing is just going to remind everyone again, the boutique and the cafe are both open on Saturday. That's in full force. And I've also been told to remind everyone that we have the Big Mike breakfast sandwich in the cafe, and it is
Oh, it's bomb.
delicious. It has
Yeah,
been
it's pretty
selling
good.
like crazy. So
I'm really
come in-
glad I came up with the idea.
Yeah, that's why it's called the Big Mike sandwich, is because
Yeah.
Justin invented it.
Yep.
Little known fact. So, and then on the podcast side of things, there's a ton of. Did you hear me just develop a British accent right there? I was Irish last week, and now I don't know what's going on with me.
That's the trial by
The
combat.
trial by combat.
it's the
yeah.
trial by combat coming back.
We were talking
Okay.
about Europe, and now
Yep. So listen
Full
to
circle.
our podcast. There's a ton of podcasts out. Go listen to them. That's all I got.
Awesome. I'm going to introduce our guest real quick. We're here with Officer Hellman. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you guys? Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. Me and Kurt are excited to have some conversations with you. I know Kurt has some questions about this fentanyl stuff that's going around, and we just really want to dive into that first. And we talked about it a little bit last week. It says 17 overdoses was the last we heard, but what are you guys looking at now? I know that you guys are kind of up against some stuff.
Well, I know last week, just personally, in one day, I had to Narcan a couple people back to consciousness. So,
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, whatever batch has come through recently has got something. There's some extra. We're pretty sure it's fentanyl. We've actually seen quite an uptick in the amount of substance we're getting back from the crime lab that's testing positive for fentanyl, whether it's in pill form. One of the more prevalent things that we're seeing is like a brown powder heroin. Almost looks like what we kind of refer to as a Mexican brown.
Yeah.
And usually if it's powdered as opposed to like the black tar heroin, that's the stuff that's almost exclusively had fentanyl every single time it's come back from the lab. But
Wow.
obviously there's something going through this recent batch that, wherever it's come from, Anchorage or whatnot.
Yeah, so, I mean, Kurt does the Narcan trainings here at our office. How many Narcans did it take for you to bring those people?
The first guy that morning, as soon as we came on shift, it was 2.
Okay.
And then it still didn't bring him all the way back, but enough that once medics showed up, they could start getting some good vitals and start talking to him.
So he did make it.
He did, yeah.
Okay.
Both the people that day, as far as we know, were good to go once we left them. The second person was also two. The first one was not effective, so pulled her out of the car, got her on the ground, and gave her another dose about 45 seconds later, and that one brought her back and
Okay.
went into the ambulance and got looked at.
Yeah, and you're seeing that about 2 to 3, sometimes 4 of these for the fentanyl stuff.
We, the problem is until with these people not going and getting blood and stuff like that, we're not sure. We can't be 100% sure it's fentanyl, but the amount of fentanyl we're starting to see in stuff coming into the valley is kind of what gives us pause and reason to believe that it's fentanyl. This stuff,
Yeah.
Is extremely dangerous. We know the cartels like to use that to keep people addicted to their product. People start building up a tolerance to that stuff, and they want to put some fentanyl in there. Hits a little bit harder, keep people coming back for it. The problem is, with a lot of this stuff, especially with ODs, a lot of people, once they get Narcan and they're awake and they're like, oh, I'm okay now, they don't go to the hospital. No, I don't want to go to the hospital. And
They're like,
the medics,
we're saved, we're fine.
yeah, no, I'm actually, as a matter of fact, the last person that I Narcan, the medic was like, look, because she was turning blue, like her lips are blue, she like agonal breathing, like the whole thing. She was on her way out. And the medic's like, look, you could have died, and there's a good chance when this Narcan wears off, you're going to go right back. And it's good for you to go to and everything. We tried everything to get her. She didn't have a warrant or nothing. Just go to the hospital. It's not going to cost you anything. Go get looked at. Make sure you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to die. That was the quote. I'm not going to die. I'm fine.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I know when I run the trainings, they talk about you can fall into a secondary overdose because the opioids are still free floating, like in the bloodstream.
Yeah, absolutely.
Past, I don't know, 40, 45 minutes ish. Like right
After
in
the
that area.
Narcan?
Yeah.
So you could have to potentially Narcan somebody an hour later?
Not even an hour later. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So they can fall into a secondary overdose.
Yep.
So that's super scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I've been doing, I've been throwing some kits together for our vehicles just so that we have gloves. We got some of the thicker gloves, but I think with the gloves is that you want a double glove if you're running into a situation where you have to handle something like when we're going through, like if we're having to help a client go through their stuff or something or whatever it is.
Upon
you know
move
what I mean?
in or something
So
to the transitional housing.
What I did recently was I ordered some kits where we have like a little grabber. So if we have to dispose of sharps or anything like that, we can do that with our vehicles. We've got, some protective gloves. I have N95s in there. Ideally we're not in situations where we're having to go into but if you don't know what a powder is, it's like you just don't know. It's better
right.
safe.
It could be just like, I mean, you're saying it's like a brown sugary looking.
Well,
yeah.
Fentanyl is usually when it's administered by medical professionals, it's microdosed out. So like very, very small amounts. So just a small amount is enough to really put you in a bad situation.
I think we talked about that last week. We had a picture where it showed it was how much heroin it takes, how much fentanyl it takes, and then how much carfentanil it takes.
Fentanyl and carfentanil especially extremely dangerous if you don't have a tolerance. And obviously I'm not advocating for people to build up a tolerance to this stuff. It's extremely dangerous when not being administered in a medical
right, because they have the
environment.
Things to be able to dose it.
Absolutely. And react, right?
The amounts, and they have the ability to get you back if it's too much or something.
And that's one of the scary things, like Kurt was saying, you get these people that they come to and they're like, oh, I'm okay now. We had a guy a couple months ago, we had to Narcan in the bathroom of cars, and none of the Narcan was effective. They actually drilled into his shin bone to get an IV running to start pumping him some fluids, and that didn't even wake him up for a little bit, drilled into his bone.
Right.
So this stuff is it's scary. It's extremely dangerous.
Definitely.
And one of the things they teach us, and I don't know if Kurt, having gone through Narcan training, probably received the same thing, but even if you suspect it may be an opioid, even if there's just a hint that just pop the Narcan just to make sure. if it's not,
because if it's not, it doesn't harm them.
Exactly.
Right.
You can't OD on Narcan. Like you're
Yeah.
not going to hurt somebody if they're not on opioids. If it's a seizure or some kind of other medical crisis.
Yeah, no, they're definitely teaching that, and and another thing too is even if you think it's another drug, is like with the polysubstance overdoses, it's like a lot of people are using like benzodiazepines with the opioids to combine the effects, and even they teach like just if you don't know what it is, administer it because it's not addictive. You're not going to hurt somebody by administering it. If it turns out to be that it was benzodiazepines or some other drug that. So that's what they're teaching us with the Project Hope for sure.
And you bring up the poly drug use. That is something we see quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, heroin's got extreme lows, methamphetamines have extreme highs, and to cut that edge off, you mix them together. The problem with poly drug use, and everybody's body type's different. Everybody's stature and makeup is different, DNA, whatever, and it's hard to tell what the combination of these is going to do in your system as opposed to mine.
Even with mental health stuff, when you're being prescribed medications, it's a trial and error.
Yep, and that's why like you may have a different milligram dose for something that I would.
Yeah, well, we're different body types and
Absolutely.
Different genetics and different family histories and things like that. So I get exactly what you guys are saying, and I definitely believe that a lot of this uptick and even the use is directly related to the mental health stuff that we're seeing. Sure. Years of direct traumas and, abuse among our peers. And what are you seeing? What are you seeing with that kind of thing out in the field with like mental health stuff?
Obviously, one of the unfortunate parts of our job as police officers is we do have to encounter some of these rough situations, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's about dead in a car, and you got to try to bring this person back to life. You don't know if they're going to make it. The drug use usually doesn't come alone. There's usually, like you're saying, some other baggage with that, whether it's mental health or whether there's some there's some other crimes going on like theft or whatever to kind of supplement this habit.
Yeah.
And so there's usually some underlying causes, right? You talked a little bit about the traumas, like past traumas. When people don't receive the care or help that they need to deal with some of these personal issues, a lot of people will go to self-medication because it's easy and it's more readily available than being able to get a doctor's appointment and go get diagnosed. Because, my assumption is, especially with mental health stuff, you don't get diagnosed the first appointment.
No.
Right? You're going to have to go see someone multiple times.
Well, in our experience, sometimes you're diagnosed wrong.
Sure.
Right? Like we talked about this before, me and Kurt, but it's like, oh, you're showing these 5 symptoms, you're this. And it's instantly kind of like you're branded this mental health thing, and now like that's your identity. It seems like, because you're like, well, I can't do that because I have anxiety.
Right.
Or I can't do that because I struggle with depression or something. And it just becomes this like, almost like it's an identity. It's a circumstance. It's not an identity. Right. And circumstances change.
Yeah.
Right. You can find relief and help and hope in other ways than self-medication. I tried myself every possible way to get help before taking medications, but that's just how it worked for me.
Yeah.
Right. So I put all my things in place and made sure I was working on my stuff. And I know Kurt's got stuff that he does that are different than people, because that's what works for Kurt and his genetics, right? Like, Kurt, what are some things that you use when you're dealing with this mental health stuff? Like, it really helps you pull yourself out of those lower places.
Well, I think music's really important for me. There's just a lot of cathartic things. But there's kind of layers, right? For me, one of the first layers is like, okay, did I get my nutrition in right? Did I not drink too much coffee this morning? Because that's going to make me irritable.
Bro, for real.
Did I eat a good breakfast? Am I, psychologically, am I holding on to stuff that I don't need to hold on to? And then there's like the yoga, the exercise, all the holistic stuff that I have to, that's in my tool belt, right? That I know that will help. And then, you know, there's parts of that, like you say, everybody's a little bit different. Sometimes supplements for me are a good, you know, like stuff like rhodiola, stuff like I use that helps with stress, but that's for me individually, right?
Yeah,
I'm not saying everybody should take that.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is like, it's like an Arctic herb, right? But there's different approaches, you can use depending on what your body's been through, what, you know, because, you know, my body's been through the ringer between cancer and everything else, you know? So
Yeah,
I mean,
man.
sometimes I have to, it's like, ooh, today's not good because I didn't eat something right. I had too much caffeine. I'm holding on to stuff. And like, maybe that means I need to like take an Epsom salt bath or something. Try to do something to curve that so that I can come back.
How long did it take you, Kurt, to learn like your own body enough to know that this is a time that this is okay for me to do this, whatever coping mechanism it is that you're
That's
using?
a good question.
Like it didn't just happen overnight, right?
Oh,
Like,
no. It's years. I want to say it started when I was 16 and I discovered that sodas made me lethargic and I had to cut out sugar. And so I've been on this journey since like health journey since like 16, but I'm learning stuff all the time.
But that's because you're not getting complacent. You're like, hey, this stuff is working for this thing, but I got to make some changes here
I was
and here.
not happy with the status quo of like, okay, I'm in this box right now of being mentally ill. I'm taking these drugs. And I was like, I'm miserable. Like I got to figure out something different. And so what I ended up doing was like, I went like, okay, this strategy helped a little bit. This strategy helped a little bit. And I never became complacent with like one approach or one like mentality. You know what I mean?
Right. It's got to be a plethora.
I just was like, okay, I've got to do different stuff because this is going to kill me if I don't heal myself, you know, and find out what works.
That goes back to what, you know, we were talking about how, you know, the dosing with multiple different things. But I mean, we do that as a medical assisted treatment now. And do we actually test those medications with each other in the lab before we're administering to people? Because if somebody's on like 6 different medications for mental health, and then like it's like you got to take this one to counteract the anxiety that this one's going to give you, and do this and this and this, and it's like, now I'm a lab rat.
Well, and I think what you're talking about a little bit is like they call that polypharmacy, at least in the lay withdrawal community that I'm familiar with. And the answer to that is I don't know that there's a ton of research with the poly substance. You know, I mean, I see studies conducted on individual substances over the course of like, you know, this time frame, but I don't know that there's a poly mechanism of action, long-term case studies for. I mean, I'm sure there's stuff out there. But
I'd like to explore
is
that
there
more with
stuff for all those different types and how those interact? And you know, that's one of the things that, I mean, when I was going through my process, I had to, I had to go, okay, well, I know that exercise works, you know, I know that eating like my breakfast helps, you know, I mean, that's pretty basic stuff. And so that was really easy, right? Cause that's like something that's tried and true that I can just go back to. And
you know, it's funny you say that. I just listened to a podcast the other day, and it's you guys have heard of Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's well.
Yeah.
So he actually talked how important it is to eat a very big breakfast. He said that has helped a lot of his patients that struggle with things, because if you don't eat properly in the morning, you don't get a big enough breakfast, your insulin levels get all thrown out of whack. And that's a sugar thing, right? So that can, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist, obviously. This is just repeating what I've heard, but you know, they say eating a breakfast is it's the most important meal of the day. That's obviously not just a old wives' tale. That's a tried and true method of good health.
I think Jordan Peterson is a brilliant.
I do too. He's
person.
brilliant.
So if you're listening and you don't like him, that's tough. We are supporters of the Petersons.
Yeah, the guy's phenomenal. So.
Yeah, I do enjoy a lot of things.
You're talking about like coping.
Yeah.
That's obviously a kind of a catchword, but there's a lot of different ways people cope. You're talking about music and things like that. I think one of the, you know, obviously medication has its place, but even along with medication, I don't think anybody would disagree that that's something that has to be worked through under the care of a doctor, like monitored. And you got to talk about these things with the medical professionals, but then also like giving yourself some kind of purpose to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
Because look,
here we go.
Look, you've been labeled bipolar, right? Let's say that's the thing.
Yeah.
that's not your purpose though. Like that doesn't define who you are and what you can be. So you got to find something to help. All right, look, I've got this thing. That's not going to prevent me from still getting to, X goal or XYZ goal,
Yeah,
whatever it is, right? You still got to find a purpose. And the way you do that is you build relationships with people, you build friendships, you build a peer support group.
Yeah, connectivity.
Yeah, and these are things that can help give you meaning and purpose and drive and motivation. And it's hard when you're in a bad place, right? You don't feel like going out and doing that thing.
You're not thinking about those
No.
things. Like it's hard enough to get out of bed in the morning, right?
Exactly. And, I've struggled with my own stuff. I've been in the military for 12 years. I did 4 combat deployments. So there's stuff that I've had to deal with as well. My biggest coping mechanisms, obviously, I have an extremely supportive family. I have a wife that's been through all that stuff with me.
Yeah.
So she understands that my faith, my relationship with Christ has been extremely important, even though I haven't always been the best example of, and maybe that's not your thing. Maybe church and religion isn't your thing. But I'm just telling you that those are things like he's got music and
those things worked for you.
Absolutely.
And that's perfect. We are open to any and all suggestions because we know it's not a one thing fixes everything. It can't be a blanket thing. It's got to be, you have to determine what your individual process of healing and dealing with these things are.
And that's why it's important to build that network of people to support you, because they can help you. Like, you're going to have a different life experience than I have, but maybe what you are using as your coping mechanism ain't going to work for me. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But, as a friend or as a support person, I can help you if I know. And one of the hardest things I think with a lot of people, I think, is just thinking that they're alone, thinking that there's nobody else out there that's having to deal with the same thing. And you're just not.
Nobody gets it, right?
Yep.
That conversation. And we trick ourselves into thinking that so much because we get into our heads and we start creating these, what is it called? What does Jim call it? He calls it,
well, in psychology, they call that like a schism of how you view the world. But there's a few different words or a scheme.
Your worldview, your lens.
Or not a schism, sorry, like a scheme. Yeah, like they have a few different words for it, but yeah.
It's something like you're assuming what people are thinking about you, and you're creating people's opinions.
A projection.
Of you. Yeah,
like a psychological projection.
Right,
Yeah,
and it's actually not what's true.
Yeah.
But when you're in that state of mind, it's all true.
Feels that way.
Right, everything's true to you until you say something, but you're so scared to say something because you're afraid that it's true. So you're like beating yourself up in this constant cycle. I mean, I do it a lot, and I have to.
Well, and I don't know how you guys are,
myself.
but I'm a lot more critical of myself and
Right.
harder on myself than I think other people are. But like you're saying, when you get into that and you're like, man, I'm not a good person.
Yeah, I'm a piece
I'm
of
messing.
crap.
Yeah, I'm messing this stuff up. Everybody else must even think worse of me, and that's just not true, because everybody's dealing with something, right? Everybody's got their own personal demons that they're struggling with as well. It's just how they manifest, and do we let it control us, or do we grab that stuff by the reins and we say, you know what, this is a problem. I know it's there, which is a good thing, right? We can identify it, but that ain't me. That's not who I am. I'm going to figure this out. We're going to manage it with friends and possibly medication, counseling, whatever it's going to take.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you so much for coming out and being on this with us. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your day. Kurt and I are going to continue these conversations with other community members. We really appreciate the Wasilla PD being able to come out here and talk with us.
Anytime you guys, if I can do it, obviously I love this place. I love what you guys do. As a police officer, I became a police officer because I love people.
Yeah.
And I want nothing more than to see people do and be better, including myself.
Yeah.
And one of the most satisfying things for me is when I see somebody a month, 2 months, 3 months after I've had a call with them, like, hey, Officer Hellman, do you remember me? Like, you helped me with this, and I'm doing real good now. And like, I appreciate you. It may have been a bad thing. They may have gotten tased or like a car chase or something, right? But it's, as police officers, I think I can pretty much speak for every person that I work with. We ultimately love our community and we love people. And while we may not have doctorate degrees to help people with mental health issues, I tell you, we care about people as people, and we can at least give you a ride to the hospital.
Yeah.
It ain't going to cost you nothing. Just let us give you a ride if you're struggling. Let us
get you connected to
we
the
can be an
people.
ear. Hey,
Yeah.
you need to talk. And I know sometimes people are intimidated by the uniform. It's just a uniform. It doesn't make me a different person.
Yeah. So I actually had a really amazing experience with one of your officers on a crisis call.
Yeah.
And he sat down with this young man and talked to him. You know, he didn't come in with his hand on his gun or anything like that. You know, these crazy stories about all of the things that officers do that are wrong. But I just want to highlight that Wasilla PD, when this man showed up to work with a client that I had who was in a situation where he was moments from ending his life, he was able to convince this young man to go to the hospital with me.
That's awesome.
And he met him like a person. They sat down and they had like a 20-minute conversation. Yeah. The officer didn't have a guard up. He was a person, and he connected with this young person. And I just love to see that. I have not seen anything but that from our Wasilla PD. I work with you guys a lot on different things, and I'm really grateful for you guys.
Whatever way we can, if we can, we want to help.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it's just amazing the level of the care, and I mean, it's not training. It's you guys are people behind the
this is real life, and
it's not something you train people to do. It's something they have.
And I don't want to speak for everybody, but I believe no matter what situation people are, no matter what they're struggling with, I believe all people have value.
Yeah.
And if there's a way that I can convince somebody that they're valuable and that they're loved and cared for by somebody, and that's why I like your guys' organization. Like people come here and they immediately are like, geez, I can talk to somebody finally. Like somebody here knows what I'm going through. It's a big deal. But you guys do good stuff. I thank you for letting me come talk. And
thank you so much, Hellman. Thank you guys for tuning in to Diag Nonsense. I'm here with Kurt Honak. And Kurt, do you have anything else? Just final thoughts?
I just love our community. I think we do good. We all do good things.
Yeah, this was an awesome conversation.
We're in it together.
Good things.
Yeah, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you guys. We're going to roll out, but tune in next week. We're going to have some more guests coming up soon. Me and Kurt have a lot of topics that we want to address. And, if you guys have anything that you want us to talk about, send them in to us. Send us articles, send us discussion topics. If you would like to be a guest on our show, reach out to us at my house and we can have that conversation too. Not everybody's going to be, able to do that, but we will have a conversation with you about it.
And the email to do that at would be my work email. It's isaac@myhousematsu.org, and that's ISAAC@myhousematsu.org. And Officer Hellman, thank you for coming on. We're going to have you back. I feel like
I agree. We have another hour's
worth
worth of 2 hours, 3 hours worth of conversation with you, man.
And if anybody, like you talked about people sending questions, whatever I can do to help educate people on what a police officer does.
Yeah, definitely.
Et cetera. Like, please, I'd be more than happy to be that advocate for the police department.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.